Good morning. Welcome to Let's Bet It here on Pickswise and Pickswise.com. I'm Mark Zeno, joined by Jared Smith. A little late start here on this Football Friday, but like any great thoroughbred, we will recover. It is Let's Bet It, brought to you by Superbook Sports. Big show today, Thursday Night Football reactions. We're getting to some MVP odds for the NFL. Anthony Armstrong, former NFL wide receiver, co-host of the Believe Commanders podcast, will join us to go over some NFC East props as well, college football week 6, and of course, our plays of the day. Good morning, Jared Smith. Good to see you again. How was your Thursday evening?
It was ruined by the Broncos. I did get 3, so at least I was in the mix for a push, but obviously the most stone cold under perhaps of the season. Congratulations. I did see a few people out there in the Twitterverse hop on the no touchdown bet last night. I paid out like 60, 70, 80 to 1, depending on where you got it. If you bet that last night and you won on that bet, I might retire for the rest of the year. Like you're not going to make a better bet in the NFL probably for the rest of the season, perhaps maybe for the rest of your life. I can't think of a one roll of the dice bet, not a parlay, that would pay that out in like a one game scenario. Like I can't think of another scenario where you'd get an 80 to 1 on a single bet without, parlaying it and actually hit it and actually feel pretty good throughout the game that you are going to hit it. A few tricky moments there, but I mean, we'll dive into some of the numbers. It was ugly in Denver last night.
Well, the last 80 to 1 long rich strike. Remember in the Kentucky Derby, they were 80 to 1.
In horse racing. Yeah, exactly. It's not going to happen. That's the only Bronco you're getting 80 to 1 on is Rich Strike.
Here's the thing. The guy, I saw a couple people who did it at halftime, right? And the number was cut in half.
Sure.
Still a good look and a good read, because at some point in time, you would have figured somebody, just by sheer happenstance with how the game was unfolding, somebody would have made a mistake and found the end zone. And you could have even lost that bet in overtime, which would have been a complete kick square in the groin if that had happened, if the Broncos would have scored that final touchdown. So that was a full-on sweat. But for the person who made that bet before kickoff, good for you. That's all I'll say on that. I don't need to talk about Thursday Night Football any longer, because my colonoscopy was more interesting than Thursday Night Football was last night. So we can move on from that. And let's look at some MVP odds here as we roll into week 5 in the NFL. Nobody from last night, by the way, is going to win the MVP. We can say that fairly succinctly.
No.
Look across the board. Josh Allen is still your favorite. Patrick Mahomes is picking up the rear with second. Jalen Hurts coming in at third, along with Lamar Jackson. Everybody else after that is 10 to 1 or worse. Let's start with those guys. Any 10 to 1 or higher number that you see from any of these MVPs that you could probably put money on?
It's an interesting question. In terms of team success, I mean, am I crazy to bring up Trevor Lawrence's name at the bottom there? I mean, there's a chance that they win the division, right? I know Indy's win last night kind of makes it a little tougher, but if all of a sudden he goes nuts over the back half of the season and I don't think it's going to happen, but if you want a long shot scenario where it does happen, I think you can throw Aaron Rodgers' name away just because he's won the award 2 straight years. To win it 3 years in a row, you have to be at the tippy top of your game. And I just don't think that's where Aaron Rodgers and the Packers offense is right now. I guess you can make a case for Joe Burrow. Comes back from the appendectomy, slow start. If they beat the Ravens this Sunday night or Monday night, I forget which day that game is. I know it's primetime. And then they continue on to win the division. You can make a case that Joe Burrow deserves some consideration, but I'll be honest. If one of the top 2 names on that list does not win, I will be very surprised. I'm not betting on that number at all, and I would probably stay away at this point because I do think the top 2 guys are the best 2 choices, but not really much value there at the top of the board.
Yeah, no, I agree. And the only reason I wouldn't buy on Jalen Hurts, I may be the only one left, but I still feel like there's some regression coming from the Eagles.
Sure.
I'm not.
They played their best football the first 4 weeks.
Yeah, I'm not ready to crown them yet at this point in time as kings of the NFC and kings of, I mean, heck, both the Giants and Cowboys are only one game behind them in the standings. So, and it's not like I think that necessarily that would be the case, but I think of it merely as they still have a long way to go to put both of those teams, distance between them. And so I don't know. It's probably just a little bit early. Give me another 4 weeks. I've always said, Jared, that September is always fool's gold in the NFL. You don't really actually know what you're looking at this point in time. October is sort of positioning month, and then November, December, that's big boy football. You find out who's really ready to go to the playoffs and who's not. So we're going to get back to the NFC East here in a moment with Anthony Armstrong when he's ready to join us. Let's move over to week 6 in college football. We are simpatico on one game this weekend. And that
are we really?
Florida laying the 10.5 at Missouri.
News.
Look, big time letdown spot here, Jared, for the Tigers after giving Georgia all they can handle. Florida is they're a hard team to figure out. Look, they've been beat up by 2 good teams in both Kentucky and Tennessee, 2 teams that are better than they are offensively and defensively for that matter. But this is not the case for this Missouri team. They're going to struggle to score. They have one of the worst offenses in the SEC. And Anthony Richardson last week in the Tennessee game against a bad pass defense still threw for 357. So Missouri can be had. This really boils down to whether they can convert in the red zone and score more touchdowns and field goals. But I like Florida to cover this number.
Yeah, and I was against Florida a little bit in that game against Tennessee. I thought the number got a little away from, where I'd be comfortable like betting against them. But I thought Tennessee, was going to win that game. And it got really close late. And there were some interesting things that took place towards the end there. And then Florida follows that up with a tough week. The hurricane comes, their game against Eastern Washington gets moved from Saturday to Sunday. They take care of business against Eastern Washington, who respectfully is a pretty good FCS program, but they were obviously overmatched in that game. But now they get one less day to prepare for what you would think is a cupcake kind of spot for them, and that's not a knock on Missouri, but I just think the emotions and the physicality, frankly. They almost beat Auburn. They had a touchdown literally fumbled away at the goal line that would have beat Auburn. And then they lose that game. And then they follow that up with a really impressive performance, frankly, against Georgia, but just not the full 60. How much does this team have left in the tank? Now they have to go to the Swamp and face a Gators team that I think is very talented. And the one comparison I make, so you look at Missouri's defense, they faced Stetson Bennett. They were good in the first half, and then they kind of, the floodgates open in the second half. Prior to that, can't really glean much from their matchup against Auburn's offense, who's just awful. Prior to that, they faced Adrian Martinez, a mobile quarterback, like what they're going to face this weekend against Anthony Richardson. Well, Kansas State dropped 40 on them, and they lost that game by 4 touchdowns. So that's kind of how I see this game playing out. Really tough ask for Eli Drinkowitz's team. By the way, Billy Napier, has the coaching edge here too with Drinkowitz. And you get this Missouri team that I just don't think has anything left in the tank. And if they do go into the Swamp and perform well, that speaks volumes about their character, because this is a really tough spot for the Tigers.
And here's another note. Last week in that game against Georgia, they were still outgained by 200 yards. They've been outgained in 4 or 5 games this year. This is not an offense that moves the ball well at all. Missouri has only won 1 road game in each of the last 3 years. Guess what? This ain't it. So, and I know the number's 10. They don't have to win it to cover, but still, this should be a good spot for Florida here. You got 2 more college games that you were on. I'll tee it up to you.
Yeah, I mean, I think this is a fun weekend for college football. I think there's some underrated matchups. This Tennessee LSU game is fascinating to me. Tennessee, I think, has the hype, and LSU, I don't want to say under the radar, but let's be honest, there was a lot of preseason hype around Brian Kelly, and then they bumbled that game away in the opener, and they've kind of been off the radar since. The Vols, this is an interesting spot for Tennessee, off the bye at Alabama next week. We'll see what their focus level is for this game. Even though LSU won that game against Auburn, a lot of the professional bookmakers and bettors that I interact with on a weekly basis here said they still downgraded LSU after that game. And it makes sense because they were awful. I think Tennessee's at a bit of an advantage here because the start time in Death Valley will negate some of that home field advantage that LSU typically gets. It's an 11 a.m. local start time. And then when I really dive into the –
You're right. If this was a night game, we'd look at this a lot differently.
If this was a night game, I'd probably bet LSU because I would say the look-ahead vibes to me and the number being below 3 tells me that LSU might be the right side. But then I look at some of those little edges that really you add up a bunch of little edges throughout the course of a handicap, and that's where you eventually get to one side or the other. A lot of the little things here to me point towards Tennessee, like that you're not getting the night factor. I think off the bye, Tennessee's focus level won't be as low. Like they've had 2 weeks to prepare for LSU. Whereas if they played on Saturday, then had to play LSU, and then had to play Alabama next week, you would think, if I'm Josh Heupel, I'm putting in the Alabama stuff during the bye week. I'm starting to make that, transition now. So it's, again, those little things where I'm not on LSU. My point is, I think the over here has some value. Tennessee runs one of the fastest tempos in the country. They're going to score their points. LSU secondary just gave up 337 passing yards to Auburn quarterback Robbie Ashford. To put that in perspective, the prior 4 games combined, he had only thrown for 372. So there's some LSU secondary problems here. And then LSU's offense, listen, Jaden Daniels, I think has shown okay so far. No interceptions, which is impressive. Very inefficient with his deep balls, but they just had this like players only meeting I was reading this week where they got together, the pass catchers and Daniels, and they watched film and they kind of polished some things up. And I think from what we're hearing, the rhetoric from Brian Kelly, we need to see more from the quarterback position. The quote was, we're way too conservative right now at quarterback. Well, that leads me to believe that we're going to start to see some more aggressive play from this LSU offense. So total in the mid-60s, I know it seems high, but let's be honest, Tennessee's offense could drop 40 in this game without blinking an eye. And I think LSU is going to show a little better offensively. So I'm on the over 64.5 in this game. The other one's an upset pick, Middle Tennessee. Listen, this is a wild ride for this Blue Raiders team. They beat Miami a couple weeks ago. Then they get beat by UTSA, who's a very underrated team, very solid team. UAB's not very explosive on offense. Their offense outside the top 75 in EPA per play. They played a cupcake schedule. Alabama A&M, Liberty, Georgia Southern, Rice. And then we got steady old Rick Stockstill, 10-1-1 against the number off a loss. I like this Blue Raiders defense, top 20 EPA per play. I'm catching almost double digits with the Blue Raiders at UAB. Yeah, I'll take that as my upset pick of the week. Maybe Middle Tennessee pulls it off, but I think they keep that one closed down in Birmingham.
All right, 2 plays for me, and you'll see both of these plays up on the Pickswise.com website as well. And both look-ahead spots here. First, start with Oregon at Arizona. Arizona getting 13.5 here. I mean, this is set up on the tee very nicely. Why? Well, because since their opening game loss, Oregon has played very, very well. They've scored at least 41 points in every game and look like a team that can win their conference. You know what the problem is, though? They haven't played anybody that's any good. After Georgia in that sense. So Arizona's got the 9th-ranked passing offense in the nation. Jaden Delores, the 5th in total passing for the Wildcats here. This is a Ducks defense that is good, but it is not great. It's not as good as the one that was out there in years past or last year. I also expect with this total being as high as it is, in the 70s, in the low 70s, Jared, that Arizona's going to be able to score. And in a shootout game, I don't know that you want to be laying 2 touchdowns here. So with Oregon having UCLA next week, guess what? Clear look-ahead spot here for the Ducks here. We'll take Arizona plus 13. And the other one I've had circled on my calendar for several weeks right now, and that's UCLA. And right after Utah had that opening loss to Florida, and then USC came out the way they were. Yeah, by the way, guess who Utah gets next week at home, or in their next game rather at home? It's USC. What I didn't expect was for UCLA to be this good. I thought this number was going to be a little bit bigger than 4.5, but I was hoping for it to be bigger. But nonetheless, the Bruins are scoring 41 points a game. They're only allowing 20. They have the 6th best run defense in the nation here. And I think Utah is also a little overvalued. Utah was outgained by the Oregon State Beavers last week. They benefited from 4 turnovers and a defensive touchdown. Otherwise, that game's probably a lot closer than what the final score showed. And the Utes offense hasn't scored more than 35 points in a game against anybody but FCS opponents. That's it. So when they've played Power 5 opponents, their offense isn't what we think it is. Sure, it's easy to score 77 against Eastern Washington, but you're not playing them in this game. You're playing a team with a legit run defense, and Dorian Thompson-Robinson is completing 75% of his passes. The UCLA Bruins convert on 57% of their third downs. I think they win the game outright here. I got UCLA plus 4.5 as my other play here. So that's where we're going here with our college plays. All right, let's turn our attention back to the NFL and the NFC East here and welcome in the co-host of the Believe Commanders podcast, former NFL wide receiver, Anthony Armstrong, joining us here on Let's Bet It. Anthony, good morning. Welcome, and certainly thank you for joining us here on this Friday.
Yeah, no problem. Good morning to you. I got my cup of coffee ready, so I'm good to go. Kids are occupied now, so I should be able to hang out for about 15 minutes or so.
Just put the Broncos game on from last night, Anthony. They'll fall right to sleep.
Just baby, my goodness, that was a game for the kickers. I mean, good night, 12-9.
Or if you'd like to show them what football should be played like, you could just put on the Washington Commanders every week.
Sometimes, man. Sometimes, my Commanders they're doing okay. They're still learning. They're still growing. They're still coming together. They found a different way to lose.
That's the problem. I actually like them this week situationally and what the numbers says, but it's like I don't know how much more of my money I can stomach putting on the Washington Commanders to do anything these days. So
tease them up to 8.5. That's a good spot. Get them through both key numbers. That's how I'm playing it this week.
Man, I tell you, it's one of those ones. Go ahead.
No, I was going to say they have the longest odds to win the NFC East. I mean, are they completely done for, in your opinion, as far as winning the NFC East or even making the playoffs?
The NFC East, I think that's a long shot. I didn't think they were going to win it coming in. It was going to be a best case scenario. I mean, Carson had to play awesome O-line defense. Everybody had to come in and be on fire to win that division. And the way things are going now, I mean, with the Giants 3-1, that's something I didn't have. I don't think anybody outside of New York or New Jersey had the Giants being 3-1 at this point in the year. So that makes it difficult. I mean, you expected Dallas and Philly to do well. It was going to be Washington having to sneak a couple of late season wins against those division opponents to try to steal that second spot. But this NFC East could send 3 teams to the playoffs. And is it going to be Washington?
Wow.
I don't know. They got to get some work going.
That would be if the NFC East sends 3 teams to the playoffs, that would be – I mean, the NFC is having a down year. If there was ever a year for it to happen, this would be the year. Let's get into some of these individual games because I do think there's some fascinating stuff going on in the markets this week in the NFC East. We'll start in London. Did you ever play a game in London, Anthony? Did you ever play?
I didn't. I didn't get to go to London. I probably wouldn't have done too well on the flight. I've learned that I really don't care for flights like longer than 5 or 6 hours. It doesn't work well with me. So maybe I would have taken a ferry or something.
Hope it wasn't the Titanic, right? And so I think that's an interesting point because travel and all of those things are going to play a factor this week. And another thing that's interesting, Daniel Jones, high ankle sprain or ankle injury in a pressurized cabin for several hours, and then the routine being thrown off. Green Bay, I'm pretty sure, I don't think they've ever played a game in London, so their entire routine also being thrown off. It's an interesting spot this week because the Packers offense hasn't looked dynamic. They run at a snail's pace. So it's really tough to lay more than a touchdown with them based off of just how they play football. What do you make of this game between the Giants and the Packers?
I definitely feel like that spread is way too big with the way that the Giants are playing. I mean, Saquon Barkley literally put the team on his back last week when Daniel Jones was out. And then you had Tyrod Taylor went out. So there was no quarterback, and he did the thing himself. He's that dude, and he's shown that. He's back to his old form. He's definitely, a person that's helping elevate this team. And I think his presence alone can keep them within 8 points. Do they win this game? I don't think so. I have to give the hat tip to Aaron Rodgers. I mean, he's one of the best in the league, obviously MVP, and he's starting to get a little bit of he's starting to get on the same page with those young receivers and starting to make some plays. And once that confidence builds, the points go up, and then Matt LaFleur can actually let some things ride.
Cowboys traveling out west to take on the Los Angeles Rams. And when you look at the Cowboys this year and you see this spread, especially where the Rams have struggled and after getting their butts kicked on Monday night by the 49ers, I think the world is going to be all over the Cowboys. I like the Rams. I mean, this is it doesn't make any sense that the Rams should be favored by this big of a number after what has transpired for them over the last 3 weeks against one of the better defenses in the league. I know Cooper Rush is still playing, and that may have something to do with the line, but still, this seems like a spot where the Cowboys may get tripped up at home against LA.
You know, I'm on the opposite side of it. I feel like Dallas can get this win. Once again, nobody saw them being 3-1 whenever Dak Prescott, broke his thumb and was out. Nobody was like, the whole season was over with. Cooper Rush is playing out of his mind. Kellen Moore is calling plays out of his mind. And I know the last time that, LA came to Dallas, LA put a whooping on those boys. They put up some points. And that's what they're capable of doing. But I feel like the way that Cooper Rush has this Cowboys team playing calmly, they're looking different. They're attacking teams differently. I feel like they can cover this. I feel like they can win this game. There's something up in going on out there in LA. Maybe it's Stafford focusing too much on Cooper Kupp, but Dallas is coming in with 15 sacks on the season, and they're third behind Philly, who has 16, and then the Broncos, they now have 17. So that type of pressure is going to get Matt Stafford off of his spot. Trevon Diggs is starting to grab the ball out of the air a little bit. Don't sleep on the Cowboys going out there to LA, get a big win.
I have to dovetail that. Jared, let me just ask one question real quick. Sorry, I apologize. You talk about Cooper Rush and how he's played, and you look at Geno Smith. Like, these guys generally are not good quarterbacks. There has to be some regression for some of these guys somewhere along the line, because if they played at this level all the time, they'd be starters all year long. And they're not. And they're not that way for a reason. So there has to be some regression at some point. How much longer can you ride Cooper Rush, Geno Smith, and some of these lesser quarterbacks to think that they're going to be able to play at that level?
Well, I feel like certain players in this league elevate a team regardless of where they go. And then most players are going to have to fit within a scheme. And it's 11 guys on the field on each side for a reason. So it's going to take everybody to play very well. Cooper Rush is he's doing a great job with the football. He's making good decisions. He doesn't turn the ball over. And if you go back, look at Ben Roethlisberger when they went to the Super Bowl. He didn't throw it very much. He didn't turn the ball over. They relied on defense. They relied on running the ball. If you have that type of recipe, you can get by with a quote-unquote subpar quarterback, but don't disrespect these guys. They're in the league for a reason. Sure, Cooper Rush got there in a roundabout way. He got cut and then got pulled back out of nowhere. I mean, the guy's going to make himself some money. He's probably going to be on a roster for a while as backup. But the regression comes in whenever those defenses actually catch up. The way things go is the quarterback and the OC, they work together. They're saying, hey, what do you like? What plays do you like? And you got to think, Dak Prescott's liked the same plays ever since he's been in the league. Now Cooper Rush is open to seeing some different things. This is my personal feeling. I have no inside information, but I feel like Cooper Rush sees things differently. So the defenses don't know what he's going to want to do. They're not able to put them in those bad situations that they would do against Dak, and they can't force the issue as much. So where will the regression show? Second half of the season, if those guys are still suiting up.
Yeah, I think with Cooper Rush specifically, I think there is an element to his game that's a little more efficient than Dak. He is putting the ball in places where maybe Dak would try to fit something in, but sometimes when you get these, like, they play more within themselves instead of trying to be the hero. Like Russell Wilson last night's a perfect example. He is trying to play up to that $245 million contract, fit balls in windows where they really shouldn't go. Like, why you keep testing Stephon Gilmore? That's like the one guy you should stay away from, but he keeps trying to fit that ball in the window because he's trying to be. So I think with a guy like Cooper Rush or even Geno, like, it's play within the offense. There's some dudes on Dallas's offense and Seattle's offense that can catch the ball. I mean, I can think of one on each team that are all pro caliber players. So stay within the offense and you're going to at least have a chance to stay in the game. And that leads us perfectly into this Cardinals-Eagles game. Because if you were going to ask me, is there one quarterback in the NFC East right now that I expect regression from, I would say it would be Jalen Hurts. Because he's playing with his legs fantastically, but his arm, the polish, where he's putting balls, we haven't seen that. Now, maybe he's taken a step forward. But, Anthony, to me, this is another one of those games where you face a Cardinals defense that's maligned, but They got J.J. Watt, they got Zach Lewis, and they get after the passer. Is this a spot where maybe we see Philly start to drift back to the pack a little bit after their unbelievable start?
I don't see this being that week. I really don't.
Okay.
I think that Jalen Hurts is in such good control of this offense. Like if you just watch the tape, the guy knows what to do with the football. He makes quick decisions. He hadn't had to throw the ball much. I mean, they're leaning on the run game. And then their defense, like I mentioned earlier, they have 16 sacks. That's a nasty defense. I mean, the way that team is built out, it's built for the way Jalen Hurts plays. I mean, the defense is going to shut you down. They're going to get creative and run the ball on offense, wind down the clock. And then A.J. Brown, it doesn't matter what you do. They're going to get the ball to him. He's going to make catches. He's going to make some plays. And sure, they're not 300-yard games and 5 touchdown passes. What matters in this league is wins. You find a way to get a W, and I think that Jalen Hurts is playing it out of his mind right now. I think that in that matchup of great Texas high school quarterbacks, that Jalen Hurts will go ahead and get that W over Kyler Murray.
One final thought here as we look at the Commanders and the Titans. Again, I don't know if I have the stomach to actually go put money on the Commanders in this spot, but it's favorable. Again, the Titans may be in a little bit, feeling themselves after last week in a game that you could argue they probably shouldn't have won when all things were said. At least the numbers don't always bear that out. It was a lot closer than it should have been. And Washington feels like they're in a must-win spot right now. Like everything is going wrong. And if Tennessee is that good, or at least have played that good, why is this number so short for them? Home dog less than 2. Like Washington a lot in this spot, especially since I think that Tennessee's defense can be had, and Ryan Tannehill is not a very good passer on the road. I don't know your thoughts here. I mean, do you have the stomach to back the Commanders again?
I do. When I first saw this line, it was actually like -3, -3.5. And I still liked it because everything lines up. Everything matches up. There's nothing about Tennessee, no disrespect to Derrick Henry, but there's nothing about them where you're like, this is the biggest matchup. This is their best player against our worst, component on the defense. Everything is really set up well. Sure, there's injuries. I mean, they do have a good defensive line, but they're the 31st ranked defense in this league for a reason. It is what it is. And if Carson Wentz is able to get the offense started early, and I think they need to be creative and be aggressive and just quickly jump on this team, get the ball out of Derrick Henry's stomach, and make Ryan Tannehill be a passing quarterback. That's going to be your key to victory. And every piece of this defense is set up to do exactly that. Now that line goes down to 1.5. It makes more sense to me. I mean, that's a field goal. That's a field possession game. They got the best punter in football in Tress Way. I could see them punting the ball deep, holding them, in their own territory and forcing a punt. And it could be a field position game. So yeah, go ahead. You can put a couple dollars on there. Maybe not as much, but just put your couple dollars over there.
I think this is an ideal teaser spot, Anthony. And, we talked about teasers on the show. It's in my column this week. You get the Commanders through both key numbers in a low total game. Mike Vrabel in his career has been brutal against the spread as a favorite. As an underdog, that's where the Titans thrive. The chip on Vrabel's shoulder, tough guy mentality. But when they're supposed to win, they kind of play down to their opponent a little bit. I want to follow up with one quick thing before we let you go. This is the return, at least we're expecting the return of Brian Robinson Jr. this week for the Commanders. I mean, talk about an inspirational story. This is a Commanders team that needs a little good vibrations in the locker room. And of course, the gunshot wound a few weeks ago, we're expecting to see him back on the field this week. What does a return like that do? Not necessarily X's and O's, but intangibles to a locker room when you see that guy back on the field. Does it galvanize a team?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, when you go through a hardship, a difficult situation, it's great to get that guy coming back. And then, too, when you know what he can do on the field, it's going to be uplifting to have him jump back on the field. I mean, when you mentioned, aside from X and O's, I got to talk about it. I feel like having a bruiser, having a powerful back like Brian Robinson is really going to help transition this offense and help them find the identity that they really want. I feel like a Ron Rivera team wants to be physical. They want to run the ball. They want to get downhill. And frankly, Gibson, I love him, but him running in between the tackles is not the most efficient way to utilize him. If I can put Brian Robinson in there, he takes those 2 to 3 yard carries into 4 or 5 yard runs. It makes the second down a much more favorable position. We get some play action, throw the ball deep. It all ties together when you get this guy back on the field, and I'm excited to see him on the field.
Love it.
He is the host of the Believe Commanders podcast. Follow him on Twitter at Mr. Armstrong13. Anthony Armstrong here on Let's Bet It. Thanks for the time on this Friday. Enjoy the entire weekend of football, brother.
Appreciate it, y'all. I got to go get these kids. They woke up now.
Yeah. I guess the Broncos game just ended because they're up.
I know the pain. I understand the pain. All right, before we get to our play of the day, Let's Bet It is presented by Superbook Sports. Best place to bet football this season. Download the Superbook app or visit superbook.com now, and they will match your first bet up to $1,000, whether it wins or loses. Plus, they already have lines up for every NFL game the rest of the season. Voted the #1 sportsbook in Vegas. Available now in the palm of your hand. Go visit superbook.com to join. Before we get to our plays of the day, Jared, please let us know what is on the Pickswise.com website.
You know, there's a lot for tomorrow. Tons of stuff for tomorrow, actually. And I don't see anything for today. There are we were mentioning that we need to speak about some baseball vibes today. The playoffs do begin. Sure. I will tell you that Caleb Wilfinger is next man up for the Yerfy Nerfy column. The Pickswise editors have done a fantastic job taking the baton from me and just, waving the Yerfy Nerfy flag proudly this year. It's been a fantastic season for them. So go check out the Caleb Wilfinger Yerfy Nerfy bets for today. I will say that I'll probably post my sheet later. It's obviously only 4 games. It's going to be a lot less work tracking these in the postseason. I will say that I've kind of flipped my vibe in the playoffs. I think the Yerfies are going to be more profitable in the playoffs, while the Nerfies hit more in the regular season. I think we're going to see better value on the Yerfy side.
You're 100%. I mean, the cheapest Nerfy price I saw today was -145.
You're not going to make money betting those every night, guys. You're not going to do it.
Versus ace, ace versus ace. You're going to be paying exorbitant prices. Hell, Scherzer and Darvish tonight are about -175. McClanahan in the early game, McClanahan and
we're going to get a -200 at some point. It's going to happen during this postseason run because the Nerfy bets have become so popular. So the books are shading it accordingly. And you're getting I saw a 5.5 tonight total between Bieber and McClanahan. So my strategy for you Nerfy freaks out there, be very gentle, pick your spots and bet Yerfies at plus money just randomly throughout the course of the postseason. During the regular season, very different vibe. A lot easier for us to find value on the Nerfy board. I would be very, very careful with that during the playoffs.
Well, by the way, as well, the totals are exorbitantly low, especially at the beginning of the series. Somebody's going to hit an easy over today. It's just a question of who. But, yeah, you're seeing 5.5 and 6s, and 7 is the highest number I see on multiple books here. So, choose your spots wisely, folks. It's handy. Playoff baseball is tough to handicap.
Very tough.
I mean, because again,
I'm not going to bet much playoff baseball, frankly. I've got a couple futures in the column. A couple futures in the fire. The Astros to win the American League. I've got an Astros Dodgers exacta. I'm not going to get too frisky. First of all, it's a tough time of year because we're obviously very invested in football. But the baseball numbers are really tough to beat at this stage. And the bullpens, you have no idea what these teams are going to do. You have past the first 3 or 4 innings, you have no idea how long these starters stay in the game for. Very hard to handicap.
One of my favorite baseball futures right now is the Mariners to win the AL.
Yeah, I've got a slice of the Mariners too at 20-1 to win the AL. I'll be on the Seattle train with you, bud.
The problem is they might not get out of the first round. This is if they get Houston in a 7-game series, I love them in a 7-game series against a divisional foe overall. Right. They have a better lineup than Houston. I think their pitching matches up really well. I think the Mariners would beat the Yankees if they get there out of the top. The only team I think they'd struggle with is the Rays.
Are you as down on the Yanks as me, coming from another fellow Yankees fan? I mean, I'm always skeptical anyways because they're not built for the postseason. What do you vibe on them this October?
Cleveland. Cleveland gets out of the first round.
I would hope so.
They're not going to beat Tampa Bay. Tampa Bay will beat them in probably 4 games.
Houston is a terrible matchup for them because of the bullpen and the pitching. I think they would beat Seattle. I think they'll beat Cleveland. I agree. I think the Seattle series is a little more favorable because their starting pitching isn't as deep. I agree on Houston. If we get a Houston-Seattle ALCS, I'll likely I mean, I'll be covered on both sides, but I would likely favor Seattle as a plus money underdog there, especially if it's like plus 150 or higher.
Yeah, I mean, so it's going to be interesting. Part of me is secretly hoping for a Braves-Yankees World Series so I can go see a World Series game here in Atlanta. How's that sound? But again, I'm selfish. So that's
yeah. What about the NL side? What about the NL side? Yeah, the Braves going to repeat? I think it's the Dodgers' year, right? It feels like the Dodgers' year.
I just hope we get in the NLDS, Dodgers, Mets, Braves, Phillies. Like, those are the best two matchups in the NLDS you want to see. Those are bloodbaths.
Dodgers, Mets would be fascinating. There's a lot of history there from a few years ago. And then what was the other one you said? Braves,
Phillies. You want Braves, Phillies.
Oh, yeah. That would be fun. That would be fun.
Listen, Cardinals might be the weakest team of any team in the postseason. I don't care what their regular season record is.
I don't love their starting pitching. They
played 70 games against really subpar teams. Philadelphia, Pittsburgh, Cincinnati, Milwaukee, Chicago, the Cubs. They just played really subpar talent in that division. If they had to play in the NL East, they wouldn't even make the playoffs.
So here's a pro tip, guys. Here's how I approach betting the baseball postseason. Look up the bullpen ERAs of every team. If they're outside the top 10, probably not going to win the World Series. It's just how I feel. To me, that's a dividing line. If you can't get outs late in the game, if you can't get outs in the 5th, 6th, 7th, 8th inning or later, you are not going to win the World Series. I'll give you the bullpen ERAs right now in baseball today. 1 Astros, 2 Dodgers, 3 Yankees, 4 Braves, 5 Guardians, Mariners, Rays. And then the Mets are 10th, the Cardinals are 11th. So the Cardinals are in that vicinity. But I told you the top 6 teams, Astros, Dodgers, Yankees, Braves, Guardians, Mariners. One of those teams is going to win the World Series. I know that's not a hot take, but to me, that's where the dividing line is. If you can get outs late in the game, you're probably going to make it to the Fall Classic. That's just how it is.
All right. While we're talking baseball, we'll transition to plays of the day, and I'll go up first since mine is a baseball play. I struggled, honestly, between the Phillies and the Mets today, but I have settled on Max Scherzer and the New York Mets, straight on the money line, minus 150. You have to believe that Max Scherzer, after his last start and getting beaten in Atlanta, will come back extra focused. Plus, playoff Max is different than regular season Max. Now, throughout his career, in the DS or the wild card, he's been much more effective than he has later on in the postseason. If you go back earlier in his career, you start to see a whole lot of zeros in the DS round and in the wild card. Now, as he's gotten later, some of those starts have gotten shorter just because managers now in 2019, 2020, 2021, 22 have quicker, leashes to not let guys pitch deeper into spots. I don't think that's the case for Buck Showalter here. And despite all the noise surrounding the Mets as they gave away the NL East, I feel like it'll be a calming influence for them. They're at home. This is a Padres team, oh, by the way, of all the teams in the playoffs, has the worst postseason winning percentage of any team in the playoffs this year at just 35%. Mets need to have game 1 to win this series. They'll do it tonight. Mets on the money line with Max Scherzer on the mound.
I would say that's a relatively fair price for Scherzer on the mound.
I think so.
Yeah, I like it.
I would agree.
All right, we are going to the ugly tree. My play of the day got hit by the ugly stick here. But you know what? Sometimes the ugly dogs need love too. Colorado State catching 3 and a hook tonight at Nevada. I'm nuts, Mark, right? Absolutely nuts. I just got hurt by the Denver Broncos last night. So what do we do tonight? We go right back to the well with another team from Colorado. So fun story before I get into this. I did like a joke on Twitter this morning, like the top 10 teams in the state of Colorado for football power ratings. And I put the Colorado Mines School beneath a couple of other like random D2 schools that I didn't do any research on this, obviously. The Colorado Mines Twitter account, the official one, actually responded, try again, because I put them beneath 2 teams that they blew out earlier in the year. People in Colorado care about my power ratings, but you know what? We're going to the well tonight with the Rams. All right, so this is kind of a revenge game in a sense. And I'll get into that in a minute. But first, let's get to the optics. Well, Nevada's lost 3 straight games. Not great, including a 55-41 loss to Incarnate Word. Good luck picking out where Incarnate Word is on a map, but Nevada lost a football game to them earlier this season. So I obviously, based off of that, very hard to make Nevada a favorite in any game involving teams with a pulse. You could argue that Colorado State does not have a pulse. Arguably the worst team in the country, 0-4 straight up, 0-4 against the spread, 10 straight losses overall. I can't believe I'm betting on this team tonight. They're coming off a 41-10 loss to Sacramento State. But again, I told you about the revenge vibes here. Couple of things to note. First of all, the Wolfpack absolutely blasted Colorado State in Fort Collins last year, 52-10. So that's in the back of these kids' minds. Secondly, the Rams' best player, wide receiver Torrey Horton, he was playing on that Nevada team last year. Played 2 seasons at Nevada, having a pretty good, despite Colorado State being awful, he's actually having a decent year, over 400 yards, 5 touchdowns. So I like that revenge vibe. And then the quarterback tonight, quarterback Clay Millen is out with an injury, so it's going to be the backup for Colorado State, Braden Fowler Nicolosi. Well, he originally committed to Nevada, backed out, went to Colorado State. So there's some interesting vibes in this game tonight. Mountain West teams, bottom feeders, but I like catching 3 and a hook against the team that doesn't deserve to be favored. I know Colorado State's awful, but I think Nevada is equally awful. And when you have 2 bad teams, I'll take the 3 and a hook, and I'll hope it's another slop fest like last night. Ugly dog tonight. Tread lightly, just 1 unit. But we are backing the Colorado State Rams. They got to cover eventually, right? Eventually, they've got to cover a game, you would think.
In theory, yes. Eventually, you would think. So
in theory,
let's hope for the best here on this Friday night as we turn the corner to a big football weekend as well. Lots of Major League Baseball playoffs. Make sure you guys keep it locked to Pickswise.com for all the sports betting information that you need. Download the Pickswise app, available at the Apple Store and Google Play. And, of course, subscribe to the Pickswise YouTube channel. So, for Jared Smith, I'm Mark Zinno. You guys have a fantastic Friday. Go make some money. Go get it. Go bet it. Have a great day. See you tomorrow.